welcome back to part 2 of the fundamentals of post-production for issue 17. Now, we looked at part 1 about how to use a layer to when making adjustments to an image to avoid throwing away information, to avoid destructive editing. And as usual with Photoshop, there are many ways to do the same thing. So I'm looking at this picture shot in Mandalay in Burma and I've processed it in Lightroom, and basically I'm quite pleased with this area of the image here, the old wall in Mandalay. All this detail here is looking just right, but the sky and some of the reflections in the water are looking a bit washed out. Now I know all the information's there, but of course in Lightroom we can tweak contrast and levels and curves, but generally speaking we can only do that to the whole image. The scope for doing it to selective parts of the image is a little bit crude compared to what we can do in Photoshop. So what I've done is I've brought it in as is, and we're going to now selectively work on this picture, just as we did in part 1 with that image in Utah. But there's a different way of using adjustment layers that I want to introduce you to. And the first thing I'm going to look at is, as always, before you start tweaking, it's really important to just decide what you need to do. I want to darken down the sky, and I want to darken down some of the water, and particular this corner of the image here, to bring out more drama in the sky, the reflections in the water there as well. And how much I want to do that, it will be different to how much I want to do that to the sky, to the water. So the first thing I'm going to do, let's just concentrate on the sky for the moment, and I'm going to make a selection, and I want to show you different ways I can do that. You know, one way is to basically use the lasso tool, as we've done before. I'll just do a rough selection and I'll feather that, and because I'm feathering it, I'm not too concerned about just how precise that edge is. So let me just, again, we go select, modify, feather, and I'm gonna go for a feather radius of 300 pixels. Okay. Now at this point I want to actually adjust the density of the sky. So instead of just working on that as is, I'm going to come down here, and these are adjustments, and we can add an adjustment layer now just by clicking on the curve tool there, and it's put up here for me. You can see up here it's made an adjustment layer, and this, it's automatically done a mask because I've made that selection. So my adjustments are only going to affect the white bit, and here we have the background layer untouched as usual. So the next thing I'm going to do is, just as before, I go image adjustment, I go here to, this is my curves for that adjustment layer. It's automatically brought up that tablet for me, and I'm just going to bring back the density in that sky, and you can see it's really giving some impact to the picture. Now it's affecting the top of the spire as well. It's similar to using a grad filter, but of course because I feathered that selection, it's quite subtle and you don't see the join, and I can really pull it back quite some way to give this part, that sky, some drama. And that's really, you know, quite impressive to have that scope. And again, I'm using this adjustment layer to avoid destructive editing. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So the next thing I do, just hide the layers tablet for a minute, is I'm going to go and I'm going to look at the this area of the image here, the water, and I want to do another adjustment curve there. So here we go. Let's just have a look at layers, and again it's put for me in another curve, not another curve, another layer. But I forgot to make my selection first, so I'm just going to go back on the history tablet down here to where I started, and first I'm going to make my selection. And just out of interest, I'm going to show you another way we can make selections, and that's up here. We have the quick selection tool there. I'm just going to click on that, and as I move across, it selects an area based on, it analyzes the picture and it selects like-minded pixels, if you like. As you can see here, it's made quite a relatively precise selection. Now of course, if I were then to say, great, that's the area I want to work on, and I go again to curves, I've got another selection here, and I'm going to start working on that area. I say I want to just enhance the contrast, just darken it a touch and enhance the contrast. The trouble is, of course, that there'll be a very definite line to my adjustments because I've not feathered that selection. And in fact, if you look in here, let's just move down here, you can see it's just all a bit too severe. I always like to feather selections because then you avoid seeing these definite line effects. So what I'm going to do is just go back on the history and come to here. I've got this selection. I'm just going to feather it again, okay? Image, select, modify. As you can see, there are shortcuts for all these sort of things. You can learn those. I'm going to feather my selection by 200. And then just again make an adjustment curve. Again, it's put my mask in there, and now I can just, what I'm going to do is, I have to be careful here because when you look at a shot like this, you always expect the water to look darker than the sky. If it doesn't, there's something wrong. And so I have to get that balance right. But I think it's coming to me. You can appreciate the progress we've made already. I'm quite happy with that. Okay, here you can see my two layers on top of each other. If I just hide those, that's my starting point, and we've made quite a difference to this picture. It's only bringing out what's there. Of course, we have to be really careful to make sure that we keep subtle at all times. And with either of these layers as well, I can choose to adjust not just curves and contrast, but levels, brightness, contrast, levels, curves. I prefer to do brightness and contrast using curves, actually. And here we have a vibrance and saturation one. You've got to be well careful of that. But you can see this business of using curves to make adjustments, using layers to make adjustments without touching the background is really quite useful thing to be able to do. And then at that stage I'd look at the picture, and when I'd made my adjustments and was happy with them, I'd then opt to flatten the image. So that's the use of adjustment layers, and just getting to know the effect of how to use layers is all part of the process. The more you start using them, the more comfortable you'll be, and we'll be using them in all sorts of situations here. So that's adjustment layers, and introducing you to the whole concept of non-destructive editing. So I'm happy with that picture now. So I would then go layer, flatten image, there it's flattened it down. I've got the background, and I've virtually finished with that picture. So that's adjustment layers, and we'll see you next month to take this process on another stage. Thank you.